Good afternoon, Mr. President, colleagues senators. It gives me great pleasure to add my voice in support of the 2015-2016 appropriation bill. Now, Mr. President, I actually listened, albeit in my office, to the 3-hour presentation by Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Kennedy Anthony, and I was really, really impressed with the delivery. I know that in constructing the budget, what has taken place in the past couple of years is that there has been an overview given on the performance of the previous year's budget. And I think that has been very critically important for us in the Senate and also us in St. Lucia generally to understand what provisions are made and ultimately executed to benefit the country. I know that a lot of the statistics may not have been what we are looking for per se. And Mr. President, I'd like to emphasize, it is so very important to have accuracy in statistics reporting. You build credibility and reputation on the basis of delivering numbers that anybody can analyze, knowing what they feel on the ground level, that are accurate and not in any way inflated. For us to first move forward and develop strategies to contend with the problems that we all experience, we need to first accurately assess what the problems are. Now, Mr. President, I also noted that there were general declines. Of course, we know that we recorded another decline in the construction industry. And Mr. President, at this point, I need to give a little pause and respond to my friend opposite, leader of the opposition, Senator Joseph. We all too often will use certain comments, and I'm not using it because it's specifically in reference to me. I'm trying to generalize it because I think that we spend an inordinate amount of time rebutting or responding to things that are said that are malicious when we ought to know better. I'm a private business person, as everybody knows, and I was appointed to the Senate of St. Lucia. There are programs that have been constructed, developed, and put out by central government to benefit a wide range of individuals in a particular sector. In my specific sector, it's the construction industry. Now, I know that in the past, it has been said many times, the true value in the construction stimulus. And on the one hand, we have Senator Joseph saying that it was for true value, but on the other hand, he's saying that we should look at developing programs for construction of homes. Now, I'm not sure which one he's speaking of, because the construction stimulus served to reduce the cost of building supplies to the nation, to every single individual, by leveling the playing field and taking a decision at a government level that requested CARICOM's intervention to remove the import duty. Having implemented VAT in 2012, we all know in the business community, it's not something peculiar to me, we all know what it represented in way of a challenge, in way of increased costs, especially initially. We had inventory on hand that obviously you would have to either look at using the same margins that you are used to, or you would have to actually add discounts, because in any event, you would have to charge the VAT and collect the VAT on behalf of the government of St. Lucia. So it's really, really misinformation to make people believe that a program is geared at just one specific enterprise, when it is taking a decision to reduce the cost of building materials through government foregoing substantial amounts of revenue that was recorded over the duration of the 18 months of the program. And I think that has been one of my challenges, Mr. President. I know that this is serious business. I feel honored to have been selected to sit in the Senate. I know that as a small country, we will always have our challenges. There will always be issues that, of course, because of the fact that we're small in size physically, small in population, and that we do not have access to resources of bigger countries, that we will have a myriad of challenges that we have to address. And I think it is most unfortunate, Mr. President, that time and time again, we have to stand up here, and instead of looking at all of the issues that my colleague, Dr. Senator King, will bring up repeatedly, that really require the deliberate work that has been clearly demonstrated by the government of St. Lucia in their deliberate manner in constructing policy and regulatory frameworks necessary to guide processes, to bring relief. I mean, it's not going to be instantaneous, but I'm very, very proud that my government in 3.5 years has accomplished what they have accomplished. Now, along with the statistics, we also recognized, Mr. President, that, of course, there was a slight increase in unemployment levels. And that is despite vast effort on the part of the government of St. Lucia. Could you imagine what the continued slide would have been had it not been for the intervention of the implementation of so many programs geared at creating employment? And of course, you know, the decline was in the overall economic performance. Now, despite the fact that your GDP contracted by an estimated negative 0.7% in 2014, it really does suggest that we're on our way to recovery, because you find that in the last 3 years of economic contraction, the margins have closed, albeit nominally, but every year we've seen a little bit of progress in that respect. Now, Mr. President, our Prime Minister also reported on regional economic developments, and it speaks to the world conditions. I think that we all too often, Mr. President, like to think of ourselves as an island unto ourselves. We are alone in the struggle. One of the things that we must consider, we did a lot of the things that our regional counterparts did way before us. So obviously, the transition is occurring for us now, but it was necessary. We understand that, again, with the limitations that we have as a small developing nation, we need to find a way to create a balance between not only providing for, you know, the recurrent expenditure needs, but also to provide for those who are indigent and who are highly vulnerable. We know we depend heavily on new foreign direct investment. And of course, the global economic climate over the last several years would dictate that that is not something that is easily obtained. Right now, the investor is in a position to dictate terms and conditions, and governments must be prepared to create, to offer very creative incentives. But, Mr. President, like Honorable Dr. King said, it also has to be with a view to trying to entice investors and match them with a type of investment product specific to St. Lucia in a way that will also greatly benefit St. Lucia. I know, Mr. President, in my area, where I reside in the south of the island, we have really one major resort development. That's the Coconut Bay Resort. And it's an all-inclusive property. And what it means is that, yes, we do appreciate the fact that there's employment generation, but there's very, very minimal spin-off with that type of investment because of the fact that everything is kept in-house. And of course, my colleague, Senator Parle, would be able to relate to what I'm saying, because as one, actually the general manager of one of the few indigenous, highly successful resort plants that are accommodation only, she would understand that they, in the 3 properties, have more of a positive impact on the surrounding community because of the fact that when guests arrive on island, they will go out to restaurants in the Rodney Bay area, and they will take tours, and they will participate in other revenue-generating activities. Mr. President, it is also notable that in terms of revenue collection, that the government has acknowledged there were increases from VAT collection. And as a result, central government has realized some of its financial objectives. Now, as much as we all have our own views on the implementation of VAT, I know that, especially now with things leveling off, that it was something that was absolutely necessary. We were talking earlier, Mr. President, about our regional counterparts. In Grenada, you have a very, very high level of unemployment right now. I think they record unemployment numbers of 33%. And I had the opportunity, I did travel to Grenada. What I found, though, and maybe Senator Powell might take a little bit of a difference with me on that, is that they did still heavily tax the resort community. So on my hotel bill, I think it was both the 10% and then 15% VAT, so overall 25%. And I don't think that's what obtains, especially with the government's consideration, despite the increase from the lower rate of VAT from 8% to 10%. Now, I just say that to highlight that in other countries, they're also struggling with the responsibility of creating a balance between what is a vital sector. And we know in St. Lucia, Mr. President, that the tourism sector is a very vital one. Now, the increases in collection, the overall deficit has been reduced significantly from $213.5 million in the period of 2013-2014 to $138.8 million in 2014-2015. Okay? This, of course, with the fact that the government still has vast responsibility, is a significant improvement. And the government, of course, recorded that there's a current account surplus. And all of these statistics, Mr. President, really show that the government policies are working, that I believe that the government is engaged in best practices and ensuring that the decisions made are highly sustainable. Mr. President, there's much being said in the public about the increase in the taxation, the licenses for motor vehicles. And I think it was on page 71. We go to right. I think it is helpful, again, Mr. President, to understand that we have certain needs that require negotiating loans. Now, if we can increase areas that are more targeted, so essentially what is happening, the person who drives their private vehicle, the individual who owns a truck, or in the case of my business, several trucks for the purpose of delivering goods, heavy equipment, etc., according to the weight of the specific vehicle, is a more targeted approach to generate revenue geared at ultimately being used for repair of the roads in a way that is more sustainable. Now, Mr. President, there were so many exciting proposals for the new year that I had to be very selective to identify some of the areas of special interest to me. And, Mr. President, we all know that our most valuable asset is our human resource. The importance of investing in our human resource cannot be understated. Several programs have been initiated by the government of St. Lucia with the primary objective of making education more accessible and more affordable. We know about the $500 bursary for every child entering Form 1, and I know that a lot of parents have been assisted. I have heard a lot of the stories where parents have gone in, and that might be the difference between being able to access some of the school supplies they need when their child transitions from primary school into secondary school. Also, there has been vast investment in technology in education's program. We know, Mr. President, that last year, 7,000 laptops were issued to students in both Form 3 and Form 4. And when you consider that originally the government of St. Lucia promised students entering into, I think it was Form 1, or Form 4 originally, for them to expand the program, and that it means that instead of waiting until each year another set of students have access to this new technology, they are actually expanding the program to include students so that they are better equipped. And Mr. President, the business community, I'm sure, would support the continuing of this initiative. I understand that I think for this fiscal year, the government is looking at a proposed new 2,500 laptops being issued to the Form 4 students, right? Yes. And Mr. President, in the business community, we know that we are looking for a workforce that's not only competent, okay? We're looking for a workforce that is up to speed with what is required for them to be more efficient and more resilient. And as we all say, Mr. President, we are really working in a global environment now. Everything that we can do to equip our people with the necessary tools so that we can maintain a level of competitiveness is something that should be embraced. Now, of course, Mr. President, we know that last year, the laptops were made through the generosity of the Venezuelan government. And again, it speaks to the fact that even in this time when grant funding is difficult to access, I think that because of the structure and the stability that the government of St. Lucia has been able to promote, that we are able to now attract and negotiate with our partners in a way that is beneficial to our populace. Mr. President, we also saw an increase in the number of Sir Arthur Lewis Community College that has been highlighted in the Prime Minister's budget statement for this year. And it means that students coming out of secondary school who cannot afford it will gain access to tertiary level education. Mr. President, in order for our students to learn, they really need to be housed in a comfortable learning environment. There has been vast and ongoing investment in our school plans over the last few years, and this is set to continue. We have, of course, the Miku Primary School has a new wing that I think is constructed. We have ongoing works at Viewfort Infant, Font Asso Primary, Corinth Secondary, Canries Infant, Clendon Mason Memorial. And the Shrizel Secondary School will be addressed in this year. Now, Mr. President, all of these schools are currently being rehabilitated. And the record of this government would clearly demonstrate that they have always, whether you look at 1997 to 2006 or 2011 to date, the St. Lucia Labor Party government has always put an emphasis on investing in our education. And in support of the great demand for jobs, the government continues to invest in programs geared at creating jobs. Mr. President, we're all familiar, we've heard the acronyms, so we know about the SMILES program that targets single mothers, and I think this is highlighted on page 57. We also have the NICE program, the National Initiative for Creating Employment. And I think that this program is really well thought out because on the one hand, Mr. President, it offers an opportunity for business owners to look at employing when probably things are a bit constrained with their finances, so they can consider employing new individuals into their organization. And of course, in the process, they know that there is an offset by the government. But it also means that that employee has access to on-the-job training, that they're exposed to the workplace, whereas probably they would not have been. And as time goes along, again, it's a sort of intermediary or an interim initiative that would be geared at not only creating a stronger, more resilient workforce, but helping business people through this period of difficulty. So, Mr. President, I would strongly encourage business people to take advantage of the program and to find out exactly how it works so that they can access that offset in the cost of employment. Now, Mr. President, the private sector, as we know, has played a very key role in helping the unemployment situation. And it was very evident in the budget statement that the government is looking for ways to ensure that the private sector continues to be in a position to develop and grow. And it's really encouraging to see that we've had an increase in investment in St. Lucia. We have several projects that were mentioned in the budget statement, namely Unicomer, better known as Courts, will commence a $15 million mega store in Gros Soleil. Also, the Diana Center is under construction on Bridge Street in Castries. Construction industrial equipment is also set to construct a commercial and industrial park in cul-de-sac. And actually, before I heard the budget statement delivered, I had seen the steel members on the ground just before you enter in to turn around to the Millennium Highway. And I was wondering about what that was. So you can see it's a large-scale project. Works also continue, Mr. President, on the Harbor Club, a 100-room hotel at Dive St. Lucia. And the largest hotel will be built at Smuggler's Cove in Cap Estate. The Prime Minister mentioned in his statement that this will create a potential 600 jobs related to construction, the construction phase, and potentially another 1,200 jobs upon completion. Now, Mr. President, we know already it's difficult to entice new foreign direct investment when things have slowed down in the global environment. The other thing that we face as an island is that we know that as a result of the economic downturn, for a number of years, there have been properties in distress. What is happening now, I think even before we can safely say that we are in the position, whilst we continue to engage prospective investors, we can safely say now that you have renewed interest and investor confidence. Because the mere fact that those properties in distress have been taken over is really, really encouraging. Because it means, again, that St. Lucia will be looked as a place for investment. Mr. President, I also wanted to share that I participated in a real estate fair organized by the Bank of St. Lucia. And that was actually only last night. So I was in Castries last night. And Mr. President, I have mixed views on it. Whilst I really think that it was a welcome initiative on the part of the bank, and I understood, Mr. President, that the bank was also looking at creating a forum whereby those who probably have debt obligations with them associated with land developments and have been experiencing very slow sales have an opportunity to present what it is that is unique about their individual developments. But also, you know, I was one of the participants. I was actually one of the exhibitors. Also, Mr. President, it allowed for a number of business people to come in and bring down the price. So it's twofold in that on the one hand, we must recognize that, and I'm hoping, that we are coming towards the end of this crunch time. I think what has happened is that the same way in the first world countries, Mr. President, you had the collapse occur in about 2008. It really took a few years for us in the region to feel the full impact of the economic collapse and the commonly referred to global economic crisis and recession. Now, I think the same way as the first world countries, Mr. President, have reported improvements in their economies, we are now really going through the pain of transitioning through that period where a lot of things have been turned upside down. What it means to any of the developers who were present yesterday is that they have to accept that despite whatever costs they've incurred, not only in the capital costs of promoting infrastructure to raw land, in the case of one of them I think was Arundel in the Bossejou area. There was also Mamiku Gardens, and there were a few others. But it means that they have to be willing to look at letting those properties go at concessionary rates. So on the one hand, Mr. President, as a business person, it puts me in a position where I have to carefully evaluate what I am doing and those others as well. But it also, the flip side of it, and I think, Mr. President, it's really, really important for people to understand. Whilst I may be disappointed in what occurred last night, one of the other things was that a lot of the persons present or who was expected to be present were not actively looking at, but they might consider buying in because of the depressed price of the property. But we have to be fair when we're looking at informing the public. In this instance, as much as it may be something that is not good for a business person, it means that it provides an opportunity for the average St. Lucian to buy into property at even well below the cost of the property between the acquisition of raw land and all of the investment necessary to actually bring it up to where it's service property, okay? So at least for the time being, I hope it does not sustain too long, Mr. President. At least for the time being, again, some people will push the argument that we are being disenfranchised, we do not have access to land. That is not what is happening right now. So in the meantime, we can take advantage of that, and we should, instead of debating back and forth uselessly on things that we know better than repeating that are not true, we should take the time to educate the populace on ways and means of positioning themselves so that they may access a small credit union loan or a fixed loan and buy into property at prices that probably will never be seen again when we do have the economic recovery that we're well on our way to experiencing. Mr. President, I think it's also notable that the government has, again, and we've heard it before, we know that there was a draft on the prospect of implementing the citizenship by investment program. So even in the same vein of what I just described there, with the current cost of property, this will also be a program that will greatly benefit the country in that, again, persons will have the opportunity to sell properties like some of those that were showcased last night. Now, Mr. President, our government continues to put in place the necessary reforms to improve on the ease of doing business. I know that, again, it's probably not going at the rate that we would have liked. Mr. President, the Prime Minister is so frank when he speaks. I have to speak a little bit about just the vast amount of responsibility that any in a position of leadership has. It's really something that you have to be fair in your analysis. If somebody is promising that everything will be rosy, everything will be fine, then, I mean, you should not really vest your, you should not look at vesting your confidence in them, sorry. But, Mr. President, the proposals that have been initiated by central government will have a direct and positive impact on businesses. I know that Dr. King had concerns about the raising of the VAT threshold from 180,000 to 400,000. But, Mr. President, I can use a scenario that I'm very familiar with. You have small canteen-type operators, right? Small restaurant businesses. And, Mr. President, not only is it something that is very tedious for them in terms of the clerical work, but you can imagine that if you have a canteen where there's a main cook and maybe one or two other employees helping them, it is really difficult if, let's say, they make average $25,000 a month, which would be maybe $300,000 in annual revenue. It would really be difficult for them to contend with the responsibility of not only doing the remittances, but consider that unlike in the instance of some businesses where it would be difficult to offset the input VAT if you're not a VATable in business, in the case of that type of business, they are actually taking raw goods, so the chicken and the other things that they may incur VAT on, but they're producing something that is a finished product. So in the case of a canteen where they may be frying chicken and doing bakes and doing chicken rotis, they're really in a position where when they charge that VAT, so to make it easy, Mr. President, to look at numbers, let's say, for example, you're buying a meal for $11.50. $1.50 must go to the government of St. Lucia. So that would really increase the cost because it's not necessarily been that the movement of price, the cost of those goods have moved along with the cost of the inputs and that. So I really understand that it's something that would be hugely beneficial to some of those that already were above the 180,000 because it means that they can readjust their business in such a way that they can benefit, be more profitable, and maybe even bring down the prices and be more competitively priced. I also think, Mr. President, that we must be cautious because at times the government would have analyzed this and seen that potentially 600 businesses would be taken off the VAT list. Now, you want that you look at business as something that you want to prosper. So you're not going to artificially keep your business revenue down on the basis of not being taxable. Now, I think that is where education comes into play, because reasonably, if you are promoting growth in your own business, you are in a position to not only collect for the government what is required for government to support all the costs associated with all of the services that we all access, but you also are in a position to promote your own prosperity and the prosperity of others.
Senator, you have 15 minutes left in which to conclude your presentation.
It's quick. Okay. 10 minutes.
You can sit, Senator Tobierre. Senators, the question is that Standing Order 35.3 be invoked to suspend Standing Order 35.1 to allow Senator Tobierre an additional 15 minutes in which to conclude the presentation. And now for the question, as many as of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Proceed, Senator.
Okay. Thank you, colleague senators. The increase in the VAT threshold also presents an opportunity for small business people. We have said, Mr. President, that this period really requires that people look at other options. With the difficulty in the job environment, I see a lot of people looking at becoming entrepreneurs, and it really allows the opportunity for them to get into business at whatever scale. So it may well be a small farmer, et cetera, that would be in a position to benefit from getting into their own business. Now, Mr. President, the government of St. Lucia also put in place a deferred tax system for the importation of capital goods. I remember when VAT was implemented in 2012, there was pretty much an outcry from the manufacturing sector. And that was largely because of the costs that traditionally they were not used to. The manufacturing sector has always had access to concessions on the importation of goods, capital or otherwise, even in the parts and components that they require to manufacture and to deliver their end product. Now, I know that it will mean relief and also free up their cash flow, and that's something that would be very welcome. But it also means to me, Mr. President, that we have a government that listens. Yes, whilst we may say we come into this honorable house quite often, and some amendments have been made, some changes have been made, but obviously you're not going to find perfection with a piece of legislation of that complexity. There would require discussions, as much as we would have hoped that it would be done way in advance of the implementation, with the private sector and the stakeholders in a way that it can actually be modified to benefit those who are really affected adversely. Mr. President, I would also like to applaud a particular manufacturer based in my area. And in spite of all of what we have said about declines, what is really going to make the difference between one business to another is that business's creativity, their willingness to look at ways of expanding in a way that they can see profit, and of course, look at what is special about their main enterprise. This is a long-time window manufacturer, St. Louis Metal and Plastics Manufacturing Limited. And they've done it, it's actually a company that has been operating since 1979, which is now operated for many years by the sons of the original owner. But they were industrious enough to branch out into woodworking. So they have St. Louis Woodworking Limited. And I think, we have to say when somebody does something well, because here you have somebody who is putting a considerable amount of investment into a new warehouse facility, into the plant equipment, so all of the sophisticated milling machinery and all of the ducts and everything that is required for door manufacturing. And in so doing, through the principal's ability to negotiate with resorts on the island, he was able to actually secure huge contracts to supply. Now, what that means for us, Mr. President, as a nation, is that those resorts were outsourcing those items. So when it came to the doors and the louver doors, hard, exotic wood doors, etc., they were coming from Trinidad and other areas in the CARICOM region. So it really means, again, that this person's ambition puts them in a position to create employment, to remain profitable, and to diversify into an area that is somehow related to the primary business, so it expands their product range. So I think it's worth commending and encouraging business people to remain resilient and to look at opportunities that exist. And I think, Mr. President, when we keep on saying things, we're in decline, yes, it's true, we may be feeling the pinch, but we really have to look at ways of getting out of that period. And I'm very, very thankful that we have a strong and stable government in place. I cannot imagine, Mr. President, what it would be like had we not. It is so critically important. And I've likened it in the past, I know, Mr. President. Let's compare it to a company's corporate structure, for instance, okay? Any good business will require good organizational structure, okay? So you will have the chief executive officer at the helm. You will have a board of directors. You will have management staff and, the regular operational staff, right? Any organization that has poor leadership or inept leadership or leadership that will not work alongside their team in a way that they can come up with effective strategies to contend with the various issues that any company is experiencing will be less likely to succeed, okay? And I mean, that is not limited to a private company, even more so, Mr. President, with a government. This is serious business. A government has it, what, 100-fold, 1,000-fold to what we are experiencing in the private sector? So you can well imagine that the government of St. Lucia, particularly when you see what is happening is done in such a structured and orderly manner, needs the support of the private sector. Yes, Mr. President, if there are issues that are causing pain, definitely, I know, Mr. President, in our Minister of Commerce, Honorable Emma Hippolyte, we have somebody that listens to the private sector. She's very, very busy engaging the private sector. I've been to numerous meetings, and she's very frank. Mr. President, one of the things that I know that has caused, I think, our difficulty in promoting recovery at a higher pace is the inefficiencies that we still have to contend with in the civil service. It's not a subject people like to hear about. And it's not something that you want to generalize and say everybody, because obviously there are going to be employees that take their jobs very seriously. But invariably, Mr. President, I can tell you that I called one ministry the other day, and I called 12 lines, 12 separate lines, from the secretary to the officer to this one to that one, and I did not get one live voice. And this was not around lunchtime. So we must understand, if we're looking at nation building, that it has to be done in a participatory manner, that we all have a key role to play, whatever part of society we reside in. Now, Mr. President, the government also unveiled some income tax reforms. I've always been of the view that, well, in fact, I think a lot of business people are of the view that the tax regime is archaic and needs to be revised. I know that the St. Lucia Labor Party government has actually been on that path for a number of years, even prior to this term in office. And I think, again, when we talk about things like building our middle class, how do we build our middle class when we penalize you if you make above $10,000? So I say that because I think when Labor Party government came in office in 1997, the personal allowance was $10,000. And then during years following, they had increased it incrementally to, I think, $18,000. And in the last budget, although I know it was something that was targeted to be increased, it was not. But Mr. President, what it really means for the average St. Lucian, as the cost of living rises, we cannot be taxed on income that is really what we require just for basic, very, very basic living expenses. So, Mr. President, the fact that the government is looking at increasing from 18,000 to 25,000 means that potentially 2,000 employees would be taken off the income tax list. And it really speaks well of the government of St. Lucia to understand that we want to put our people in the position to strive to attain a better standard of living. And, you know, we should be so guided, Mr. President. We in the private sector should always look at profitability in the context of who we support, okay? We know that our staff are integrally responsible for our success. They're part of it, and they should be treated accordingly. Mr. President, the government is also, well, in fact, I have to highlight, Mr. President, in Beaufort, you have this group that has been really pushing, and they're looking to be formalized now. In fact, they have been formalized, and they made up a new board for Southern Tourism and Development Corporation, STDC, otherwise known as. And Mr. President, they are really looking at the construction of a marina in Beaufort. And unlike my friend here over on the opposite side would try and make it seem, hosting certain meetings and doing what they're doing in the backdrop has no guarantees whatsoever. And I must really commend the individuals that make up that group, because you can see the sheer community spirit that they have to just want to see some major private investment in the south of the island. Mr. President, we speak about the Hiranori International Airport, and we know that this is an airport that requires redevelopment. It's also a major port of entry, and reasonably, we also look at the possibility of a marina that would support the construction of a fixed base operation. So, I mean, there's several programs that are very closely tied together that will promote the very development we require or the catalyst, be the catalyst to stimulate the development we require in the south of the island. Now, I know my time is running out, so I'm going to skip ahead, Mr. President.
Actually, Senator, you still have 38 minutes left.
30?
Yeah.
Oh, 30. No, it can't be 30. Yeah, because it was 10.
I was looking at the wrong one. Okay. You have 18 minutes left, sorry.
Okay. So you have individuals who take a lot of their time, Mr. President, and they will engage in discourse. And it's Dr. Anderson Reynolds and Julius James are the main individuals. And I would like nothing more to see that type of investment, not only for the immediate benefits to the private sector, but to the community at large. Mr. President, we must engage our populace in a way that we understand what investment means. We do not feel that if it is done, it's somehow for just the bigger people in society to benefit. We really need for people to be made to feel part of the process, that they understand there's a direct benefit to them, and not create this dissension. And you know, Mr. President, when I hear all of this thing about poverty, I wonder where we live. You know, I really, really wonder where we live. Because it's not to say that we don't have poverty in St. Lucia, but look at what other parts of the world are experiencing right now. Really look at what is going on, the kind of instability, the ISIS movement, the sheer fear for your life every day. I mean, we have our challenges, but really and truly, what we should be encouraging people to do is to become more industrious. Go back to the way that we did things before, when we had less access to, you know, all of this in way of, you know, Western ideals and the internet, etc. Whilst we access information, we have to learn how to use that information to our benefit, okay? Use it in a way that we become stronger, because we look at things like providing for ourselves and our family through maybe planting a patch right there next to our house. I'm not saying that I would ever wish on St. Lucia, Mr. President, what some of the atrocities that are happening in the world, but we really need to have a reality check. We need to know that we have a small populace. We have 170,000 people. So we're really in a position to build on the building blocks of progress and to ensure that we remain resilient during this time on our journey to experiencing growth and prosperity. Now, Mr. President, the government of St. Lucia has also made vast investment in our hospital plans. I know it's been long, it's long in coming, and we all know that the General Hospital has been under construction for a number of years, and it's just in the last final phase of being commissioned. Hopefully, according to the government's estimation, the hospital will be commissioned towards the end of this year. And you can only imagine what that means for St. Lucia, for the North in particular. Access to not only a more comfortable hospital environment, but the state-of-the-art medical equipment that comes along with it. Nobody wants to be ill. Nobody wants to be confined to a hospital bed. Nobody wants to fear that they have a disease or something that they cannot access the treatment here. It really means good things for us, and we are all looking forward to this hospital being commissioned. In the south of the island, Mr. President, we also have St. Jude's Hospital. And when the government inherited came into office, they inherited a hospital that was unfinished and with no funds. The government of St. Lucia and the Prime Minister himself negotiated with the Taiwanese government for loan funds to ensure that every facet of completing, outfitting, and commissioning the hospital would be covered in those loan funds. So it means exciting times ahead. It means that we have an opportunity, Mr. President, to not only benefit as locals from better quality health care that we are all entitled to, but it also means that we can partner with other organizations, with the medical schools that we've been speaking of, and maybe look at exploring, Mr. President, opportunities that exist in retirement tourism. We know that a lot of the programs that we have initiated would require proper medical facilities. And Mr. President, I want to really be clear on that, because I believe that people almost misconstrue that if you say that this will position us well, what we should look at is everything that we do in our country, we strive for excellence. So the way we treat our local counterparts, whether it's a small boutique operation that we have, a hotel resort, a canteen operation, whatever the business is that we do. We're a farmer, we're looking at our produce, but doing it in a way that's sustainable. We are looking at our end user, our customer, as our local counterpart. Everything that we do with excellence means that we're already positioned very well for any other opportunity that arises, because we will be seen to be people who are looking at raising the standards of how business is done, right? And that is something that I would really like to see, Mr. President, is that we increase those standards so that when maybe a retirement community is, or somebody, an investor is looking at putting down a retirement community, they know that they don't have to worry about not accessing high-quality health care. Okay? Mr. President, we know, of course, I think some time ago we had also looked at the framework for the Millennium Heights Hospital. So the act has been passed for both the lower house and the Senate. And I know that the government is looking with a view to improving on the regulatory processes to make sure that the services are sustainable. We have spoken very much on that, so I don't think I need to say much more about that. Mr. President, by the end of this year, potentially, that means that we will have the most modern hospital plant in the OECS region. I mean, that's something that we should be proud of. It doesn't matter what side of the room you're on. We should be proud of that, definitely. Now, Mr. President, I speak about it often, and I think that it's worth speaking about. Really, we have to encourage people to make the necessary lifestyle choices, okay? As much as we want to have that access to health care, there are a lot of things that we expose ourselves through our own choices. And we always talk about the high incidence of non-communicable diseases that plague this country. And imagine when you say a lifestyle disease, it means that it's really things that can be done differently that would prevent you from being plagued with those diseases. Now, Mr. President, it should not be seen also as something that is a political issue. This is something definitely that is a national issue. We need to speak about these things. If we want to beg to differ, let us differ on things that make sense. Let us not debate on things that, or make people believe that there's something being done wrong or to harm them in any way, because that is not what is happening, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, I also wanted to, well, I guess I have been speaking about it because it's something that has been really troubling me, but the general negativity is something that we need to get away from, okay? We have very, very real issues. I actually saw Honorable Dalson's contribution to the debate on the budget, and I think I'm quoting him verbatim. He said that you have to demonstrate that you have the capacity and integrity to hold the mantle of responsibility in this country. Okay, Honorable Harold Dalson. And that is what I think has been, for me, what is really an honor. Because I think of, you know, being at the helm of a company is one thing, where you have 40 employees to worry about your own family, your livelihood, you know, the extended community, right, that benefit from your business operations. But being at the helm of leadership of a country is not to be taken lightly. It is something that requires a lot of will, strength, and also the wisdom to be able to discern not only what needs to be done, but some of the issues that you cannot just keep on rehashing. The direct focus that this is the way we're going. We understand that there are a lot of issues to resolve, whilst we have to increase our collection of revenue, but we also have to look at alleviating some of the costs of living. And I think, Mr. President, you know, I feel truly privileged to be associated with the caliber of men and women that make up this government. I'm really, really happy to be associated. I am exceedingly proud to support the 2015-2016 appropriation bill. There are exciting times ahead for St. Lucia. Thank you.